35%. That's the new tariff the US is slapping on every Canadian import starting August 1st. Not just steel, not just aluminum, everything. And it doesn't stop there. Canada retaliates? Trump promises to double down. We're talking about a trade relationship worth $761.8 billion in 2024, now on the brink of collapse. The reason? Fentanyl, or so Trump says, blaming Canada for the flow of a deadly drug, despite the northern border accounting for only 43 pounds seized last year. But is this really about fentanyl? Or is it about power, politics, and election year dominance? Trump has already imposed 50% tariffs on Canadian steel and copper, 25% on cars. Now a blanket 35%. The warning? If Ottawa hits back, the tariffs will rise even higher. The threat? Trade partners around the world could be next. So what's really going on here? What are the stakes for the global economy, for US consumers, and for the future of North American unity? Let's go inside and uncover what's really happening behind the scenes of this unfolding trade war. Donald Trump has reignited a fire that could burn straight through the heart of North American trade. Starting August 1st, all Canadian imports into the US will be hit with a 35% tariff, and that's just the beginning. Trump's warning? If Canada dares to retaliate, he'll stack additional levies on top. Are we watching the collapse of NAFTA's successor? Or the opening salvo of something even worse? A continental economic fracture? What happens when allies turn adversaries? And who pays the price? Trump claims this is about fairness, about fentanyl, about defending the American worker. But is that really what's at play here? He accused Canada of failing to cooperate on stopping the flow of fentanyl, a devastating drug crisis that's killing Americans in the thousands. But why use trade policy to enforce drug control? Why not diplomacy, intelligence coordination, or law enforcement? Or is this about something else entirely? Power, politics, and punishment. Trump's move comes as he sharpens his campaign rhetoric in 2025. His base? They love it. Tariffs make him look tough, nationalistic, protective. But here's the reality. Canada is one of America's largest trading partners, and mutual dependency runs deep. In 2024 alone, $761.8 billion in goods crossed the border. Is it realistic to weaponize that relationship without collateral damage? Or is Trump gambling that the short-term optics are worth the long-term instability? Canada didn't back down. Prime Minister Mark Carney reminded the world that Canada has already implemented 25% counter tariffs on a wide range of US products, from cars to food to steel. Is this just the beginning of a tit-for-tat war? And how far is Ottawa willing to go to protect its sovereignty and its economy? Will Canadian voters demand an even tougher stance, pushing Carney into a corner? And what happens if both sides refuse to blink? Trump cited fentanyl as a core justification for the 35% tariff. He claimed that if Canada cooperates on stopping the drug's flow, he might reconsider the levy. But data from US Customs and Border Protection shows only 43 pounds were seized at the northern border in 2024, and 58 pounds so far this year. That's serious, but dwarfed by the flow from other regions like Mexico and China. Is Trump overselling the Canadian angle for political convenience? And if so, what does that say about the integrity of US trade policy under his influence? Canada already faces 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum, 25% on autos, and 50% on copper starting August 1st, and now blanket 35% on everything else. What industries will be left untouched? Which sectors are safe? The short answer? None. And here's a more disturbing question. Is this just a preview of Trump's broader economic doctrine if he returns to power in 2025? If you raise your tariffs, Trump wrote, we'll raise ours even higher. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a warning. What happened to diplomacy? What happened to alliances? Have we entered a new age of transactional foreign policy where only threats matter? And if so, who's next on the list? The United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, was supposed to replace NAFTA with something more stable, modern, and fair. But these new tariffs, they openly violate the spirit, if not the letter, of that deal. Canada tried to comply. They even withdrew their digital services tax, a huge concession, just to bring Trump back to the negotiating table. Now, the US has effectively broken that trust again. How long can a trade agreement survive when one party plays by its own rules? And if USMCA collapses, what happens to the North American economy? Trump insists that the $62 billion trade deficit with Canada is a national security issue. But economists have long debated this. Deficits aren't necessarily a sign of weakness, especially between healthy, mutually beneficial economies. So, is Trump genuinely concerned about economic risk? Or is this rhetoric designed to ignite fear and justify drastic moves? What kind of precedent does it set when national security becomes a blanket excuse for unilateral tariffs? Here's the dirty secret of tariffs. American consumers often foot the bill. When tariffs rise, importers pass costs down to buyers. That means higher prices for American families, reduced supply for US manufacturers, and disruption across key industries. So who really suffers here? Big government? Or small businesses and everyday people? The world is watching. Europe, Asia, South America. If Trump can turn on Canada, arguably the US's closest ally, what's stopping him from doing the same to everyone else? How do trade partners plan long-term investments or build trust when the rules can change overnight on one man's command? And what will allies like Japan, South Korea, and Germany take away from this message? This isn't just about Canada. Trump also told NBC that he's planning blanket tariffs of 15 to 20% on most US trading partners. That's a total overhaul of global trade, and it's coming fast. Will this spark retaliatory tariffs from the EU, China, and others? Will the WTO get involved? Or will the world simply bypass America altogether, building new alliances that exclude the US? Could America be isolating itself, economically, in a moment when global cooperation is more critical than ever? The consequences of economic nationalism stretch far beyond the price tag on a grocery item or a car. They affect global investment flows, currency markets, job creation, and inflation. What begins as a policy announcement in Washington can quickly spiral into a multi-nation dispute with unforeseen outcomes. Trump's approach doesn't exist in a vacuum. The ripple effects will be felt in boardrooms in Frankfurt, on trading floors in Singapore, and inside auto factories in Ontario. Are we prepared for a world where economic shockwaves cross borders faster than diplomacy can react? Analysts are already warning that this could push inflation upward again, just as central banks were beginning to tame it. If tariffs disrupt supply chains, delay shipments, and add cost layers, prices across the board could rise. That means more pressure on consumers, particularly low and middle-income families already stretched by previous economic cycles. Will voters blame Canada or the man who signed the tariff order? Meanwhile, behind the drama of tariff declarations lies the real battlefield: global influence. Every economic confrontation with a trusted partner gives rising powers like China an opening to strengthen alternative trade networks. As the US pulls away from alliances, others step in to fill the void. Does economic isolation risk turning America from a global leader into a lone player shouting across a wall of tariffs? Consider the timing. These tariffs are being announced in an election year. That means every move Trump makes is as much about polling data as policy. His strategy aims to energize his base by appearing decisive, nationalistic, and willing to take on traditional allies. But does a short-term political win justify years of economic damage? And is this really the kind of leadership global markets want to depend on? We also must consider the human cost: the factory workers laid off due to retaliatory tariffs, the farmers losing export markets, the small businesses squeezed by rising costs. Tariffs may appear tough in a headline, but in the real economy, toughness often looks like job losses, shuttered storefronts, and thinner paychecks. Who speaks for those caught in the crossfire? In the end, trade is not just about goods. It's about relationships, about trust, consistency, and cooperation. When those values are undermined, it's not just trade that suffers. It's diplomacy, security, and America's long-term credibility as a global partner. So the question remains: how much are we willing to sacrifice on the altar of short-term leverage? Trump's 35% tariffs aren't just a trade move. They're a symbol of a new political strategy: high risk, high reward, zero compromise. Whether you see it as patriotic protectionism or reckless economics, the consequences are real, and they're unfolding right now. So what do you think? Are these tariffs justified or dangerous? Is this strong leadership or economic sabotage? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you support Trump's bold new approach? Or are you worried about the ripple effects hitting your wallet?